So I'm going to talk about what's happening in Latin America with fintech companies, what actually is happening in terms of the startups and the companies that are driving this revolution in Latin America, and how they are contributing in this evolution of finance, which is the topic of this panel. The numbers are a bit old because they are from end of 2016, from a publication we did with Finovista, to put numbers of what's happening in Latin America. Right now we're in the middle of doing the new report that will show 2017 data, so we'll have interesting information. So as the President Moreno said in the inaugural words, we identify more than 700 fintech firms in the region. Our rough calculation is that they are about 1,000 right now, because there's been double-digit growth in almost all markets that you see there. There's a big change from this, from what you're seeing in this, in the sense that Chile has now surpassed Argentina as the fourth hub. But while it's understandable that Brazil and Mexico, given their size, lead, what I like to point out is that 95% of all these companies and innovation is happening in the top 5 countries that you see. So it is happening, but not across all Latin America. Another characteristic is that this revolution is quite young. 60% of these companies were created after 2014 and after. Although there are some that have been there for a long time, but really the revolution you can start seeing 2014, which shows, the increased connectivity in the region, the increased use of smartphones, and all these entrepreneurs that have realized that there's a generational change, that the consumer the demands are changing with millennials, and that more service needs to be provided. Another way of looking how young the system is that about only half consider to have a product that is mature enough, measured by the development stage of their companies and their products. So less than a third are in the process of growth and expansion. So they still need to prove their business models. And this can also be seen in the number of employees. Most 75% of the companies just employ between 1 and 25 persons, so they're still small companies, but nonetheless, there are some that employ more than 20, 50 people. Those are the largest companies, which some of them are operating in more than one country. So one of the things we found too is the emergence of what we call the fintech multilatinas, those that are operating more. It's true, 80% only operate in one country, which shows also because the fact that they're quite new. But we're seeing this trend of every time there's more of these companies that operate in more than one country. And in this regard, especially for smaller economies, it will be very important because sometimes their market, especially in Central America, might be too small for them. Okay, so we went. So another characteristics is have they received finance? We asked them how you are financing your venture. 60% have received some finance, and 45 are looking for additional finance. So there's an opportunity there. But let's also look at who is financing. Where is this investment coming from? First, by the end of 2016, we estimated that about $1 billion in accumulated investments had reached these companies in the region, but most have received angel investments mostly, and investments from accelerators. Very little participation of banks, and that percentage that we see that banks, which is so only 7.9%, is mostly driven by the international banks, foreign banks more than the Latin American banks. There's also very small presence of government programs, of government funding to this type of enterprises, with only 13.7%. So this shows that there's still an opportunity in terms of partnerships with banks, financing by banks, and the role of the public sector for this. So now that I have the characteristics, what are they doing? What in the region, what segments are they doing? And similar to other countries or regions, the leading categories are alternative finance and payments. But besides, and one thing I would like to note, in alternative finance, there's many types of fintechs. They are not the same. They do have very different business models. You have from crowdfunding to balance sheet lenders to other types of marketplace platforms. So it's very important to get, I don't have time now, but it's important to look at every single one. And for that, the IDB has two publications. This one in which you will see all the fintechs by the type of segment, sub-segment, plus the study that we did with University of Cambridge and Chicago, which puts actual numbers of how much money is flowing through these different segments. So I invite you to look at those differences. So while payments and alternative finance platforms explain 50%, it's important also to look at the other categories and why they are important in the evolution of finance and the impact to people, which is what we care at the end of the day when we talk specifically financial inclusion, for instance. And I point out to the third category, which is business financial management, and the fourth, which is personal finance management. Why it's important to look at this? Because these fintechs are providing tools to people, tools that before they were not accessible because maybe it was too expensive, or you had to be, very rich person to have a financial advisor. But with all these new applications, any citizen can now plan better their savings, plan better their expenditures. A business can manage their digital flows better. So it is not only lending, as sometimes we think of fintech, but they're also allowing companies, small companies in particular, and people to better manage their finance in the different aspects that it implies. Now, there are other segments that are small, for instance, that relatively small but are growing, but it's still interesting that from the InsurTech is only 4%, but I'm sure that in the new measure we're going to do this year, this will increase, and it's a trend that we see in Latin America. And just to finish with the segments, another thing that is evolving but is interesting is who are they serving? Are they B2C, meaning business to consumers directly, or business to business? And we see that it's kind of half-half, and it's also moving. So there are both types of fintechs in the region, not only the ones that, for instance, compete with banks directly, because there's a lot of business to business. Now that we're talking about segments, I just want to show what do the innovators of the region, the entrepreneurs, think of the regulation. And obviously, this depends on the type of segment we're talking about. So, for instance, crowdfunding, which is a really innovative new models, by far the majority think that there's no regulation and that it is needed. You compare that with other, for instance, business financial management, the bottom one, where most entrepreneurs say, well, that current regulation is fine, and it's understandable because they're just tools that they're creating to help people. So what does this look like by country? We see different results, and obviously this is combining all the segments, so it might not be the best measure, but what I like to point out is that Chile, since we're here, that 46% of the entrepreneurs are asking for regulations for their companies, and just is the smaller case with Peru that think that the regulation is excessive. So what we see is that they want to work with the regulators. They want to get, provide even to the customers the certainty that we're moving towards a regulated ecosystem. Just to finish, so another interesting thing, and why, going back to the point of how they're contributing to the evolution of finance, which is the topic of this panel, is the focus on financial inclusion. 42% of the companies declare that they aim to serve clients that remain excluded or underserved by the traditional sector. And one of the reasons why we think this is very positive and will likely result in financial inclusion is the topic of better product design. Because these, at the end of the day, what fintechs are bringing to the table, better product design for people. They choose a segment and they try to solve the problems of that segment. This is very important in a region where financial exclusion not only happens at the lowest income brackets. No, take a look at all the available surveys. It is across all income levels and across all ages. And normally it's because people either don't trust the system or simply don't see a value proposition or a value in general in the products being offered. So having these fintechs changing the way that we offer, we design, we solve people's problem can be very effective in our region. Now, I don't care whether it's a fintech or a bank who provides this. What I care is that there's a change in how we serve better people and their needs, so they can be part of the formal financial sector. Because the people that are not included, it's not that they do very, even I would say, complex financial decisions every day, but in the formal sector. So how we can bring them to the formal sector through this. So that's the one we see quite positive. And the other one is this focus on small and medium enterprises. 1 in 4 of these fintechs consider SMEs as their main client. And then again, this is very important for a region where the SMEs are one of the hearts of the economies, but are underserved through many levels. So the fact that they are focusing on trying to solve either the financing needs or through the financial management tools and others, insurance, we think that the impact of these companies can be very positive for Latin America. Obviously, there's a long road towards there. We saw it's still a young ecosystem, but it's very promising. And if the private sector and the public sector work together, I think that this is only good news for Latin America in the future. Thank you.